It's Chaplain April, day 3 of my program, Doctor of Ministry program at Southern Methodist Perkins School of Theology. I procrastinated quite a bit, so it's a little bit later than I would like it to be right now. I turned this whole table around because there's some cute little things there on the wall. Can't see one of them, but anyway, just for something a little bit different. So let's just go over the notes of day 3. So I wanted to start by saying that God is so good, because I was just thanking Him today for leading me to this program, because it wasn't even on my radar. I mean, I wasn't thinking that I was going back to school at all. I wanted to, some of you know the story about me going into real estate and everything, and so I knew about chaplaincy board of certification when I was at St. Mary's Hospital, 7-8 years ago. And I remember thinking, because the chaplain I worked with said right before I was leaving, he was talking about getting board certified, and I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that. I'm just, I'm not even going to be doing this anymore, and so I don't even have to worry about it. And it took about 6 years for me to come back to this whole knowledge of my vocation. So this is part of what we've been studying, and I was able to share this story in class that this personal story that I have that is very, relevant to what we were studying. So the whole visions of vocation, and so I came back to what I always knew was my vocation. So in real estate, I was having to press my chaplain self down, or push it down, kind of push it away, because I was trying to chaplain the people that I was, working with, selling houses to. So that doesn't really work in sales. So when your highest gifting is compassion and empathy, then that tries to kick in all the time. And so one of the things that somebody said in class about vocation is that there's an underlying feeling of, maybe I should open this window because it's raining, so it's really pretty outside right now. There's a tugging. So when it's your calling and your occupation that meet up, it's like there's this tugging at you. And that's what I always felt when I was in real estate. It's like I love it, but I don't have the passion for it. And so the passion was really in chaplaincy, whatever way that I can do it, whether it be hospital, hospice, volunteer. I mean, I'm always going to be a chaplain. It is just in me. So I was able to tell that story, and so what was I getting at with that? Okay, so it was the fact that I was thanking God. So had I not come back to chaplaincy, I would have never even done a doctorate, doctoral program, probably, because it's my belief that because of different reasons, because of exactly where I am now in my career, is how I was led to this program. So, there's that saying, God works in mysterious ways, and He does. And it's not the mystery, that's not the mysterious that we think about, like a mystery like a mystery movie or something. It's that mystery that I was talking about the other day. I don't have those notes. But he works in a spiritual, mysterious way. And so he gently guides us, you know, he nudges us. And I am so thankful that I'm in this program, because I am such in my element right now. Just being in class and being able to talk about this, because most of the time people say, oh, don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion. And it's like, okay, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I mean, we can talk about the weather, but I'm really not, you know, it's like that's the main thing. Like I'm all about theology. I want to talk about theology. And so I'm in this class, and so it just feels like such a breath of fresh air, because I'm in my element. I'm with my people, you know, like we all get each other, you know, and we all have the same kind of sentiment. And so I'm thanking God, because he, through a series of steps, and that would be a long story and different reasons, you know, just the fact that I'm in the ICU right now and stuff like that are reasons why that I was able to put on my application that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And all of this culminated into me doing this program. So I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm supposed to do this, and I feel it. And I was having to ask my mentor, you know, do I put this off a year, just because of all the things that I spoke about in another video about how I didn't have any paid time off, and you know, it would be easier not to do this now for several reasons, just, you know, at my work and for my manager, all that kind of stuff. And she said, well, if God is opening the doors, then you walk through them. So there is something called the doors prayer that we pray, that she taught me. And it is when you're trying to make a decision about something, you pray the doors prayer. And it's very simple. It's just, okay, Lord, if you want me to do this, then you open the doors. If you don't want me to do this and it's not in your will, close the doors. So, and you will see it happen. You will feel it happen. It will just, if it's something that he is sending you to, that he wants you to do, the doors will open very quickly. Maybe not very quickly, but very easily. You're not going to have to beat the doors down. You're not going to have to like do anything or finagle anything. It will just all fall into place. And that's what happened with this. I mean, I had a few hiccups, but other than that, most of it fell into place. So I'm thanking God for that. And I know that that there's a reason. This is leading me to something else. You know, I've always had this notion of teaching theology, and I, you know, maybe I will end up being a professor of theology, which would be a dream too. Maybe I will be a, you know, pastoral care supervisor or something, but I know this is leading me to something. But what I was getting at is that I am really living one of my dreams right now. And just recently, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, I was saying, because of that dark night of the soul that I had gone through and all of that, I was saying, and that came up today. He talked about St. John of the Cross and the dark night of the soul. I was just like, yes, I'm almost in heaven right now. You know, and these people just talk my language. So I was saying that I had stopped dreaming, and that is absolutely true. I stopped dreaming about a lot of things, just losing all the weight again. I stopped dreaming about, oh, you know, I'm done with education, and I stopped dreaming about, you know, maybe just different things, you know, buying another house or this, or just a lot of things. Dressing the way I want to, because I don't dress completely the way I want to, because I'm not the weight I want to be. So it's kind of like I'm punishing myself. But there's just a lot that goes into that when you stop dreaming. And so I feel like, so here's the thing, whenever you say things, okay, so we'll have to do a study on speaking words out, because you're gonna think I'm crazy, but words are powerful. It's almost like they're alive. So if you do a study on it, you will see that. And if you believe that God created the earth, it was his words that were spoken out, that were sent out to do all of these things. You know, God said, let there be light. It was just words that he spoke, and it happened. So our words are very powerful. I try to teach this to my kids, and I say, you know, when they say something that it alerts me that no, that wasn't right. You shouldn't talk that way. To say something negative about yourself or negative about, it's not just negative, it's just things that are damaging that you can say. You know, oh, I'll never this or whatever. And this is something my dad was really big about. It's like, no, you speak out the words that are going to accomplish that thing, or that are going to make it possible, because sometimes we trap ourselves by our words. So some of those things I spoke out, some of them I didn't. But when you speak out things, okay, at least two things happen, right? The enemy hears what you're saying. He can tell your attitude, all those things. And so he jumps in and, you know, it's like, ooh, that's a fear of hers, or blah, blah, blah. And I remember being at counseling one time. This was back when I was in my first marriage. One of the counselors asked me, well, what are your fears? And she just wanted me to, you know, lay them all out. And I said, well, I don't know that I want to voice them. And she said, like, she'd never heard anyone say that before. And it's true. I don't want to voice my fears, because that is giving too much information that could be damaging to me. So when you say some of these things, the enemy jumps in and he'll, you know, screw things up for you. But what I'm realizing right now is that God also hears what we're saying. And I think he heard me say that with such a heavy heart. I had said, I should stop dreaming. It's not like dreams weren't in my head, but I wasn't like dreaming like they were going to come to pass, like it was going to be possible. And so I think God heard that. He heard it with the truth that I was saying it with, the heaviness that I was feeling, and the defeat. It was just like, yeah, you know, what's the point in dreaming, because none of those dreams are probably going to happen anyway. And I watch people on YouTube that do these vision boards and this, and, you know, let's manifest it and all of that, and I'm just like, I don't know. But he heard me say that, and now here I am actually living one of my dreams that I absolutely never thought could be possible, because I always knew when I looked into it that I didn't have the prerequisites for it. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I've always wanted a DMin. I'm not going to be able to do it unless I go back and do all this other. And so somehow, some way, God made it possible. And, you know, he is the one that finds a way when there is no way. He will find a way. If it's something that's in his will that he wants to happen, it will happen. I mean, you know, and so here I am actually living one of my dreams. Now, I'm not there yet, you know, I still have 3 years to go, so I don't want to, you know, I'm just in class 1, so, but I'm living one of my dreams, just being in the program and just having this available to me and it be a possibility. So I was thanking God for that. Anyway, I think it's a good thing to thank God for things that we have in our life. We need to see the positives that we have, and that you know, we all have so much more than we think we do. We all have so many good things in our lives that we can be thankful for. And I think we can all find something to be thankful for. Okay, let's get into these notes. So today we went over this practice of adaptive leadership. This is a really jam-packed book. I mean, it's got tables and this and, you know, all kinds of things in it. So this is about, it's like challenging the old way of leadership. And so adaptive meaning like when things are changing, and when you're a leader, you kind of need to figure out what's going on. So there's this whole scale thing in there, and you know, where you diagnose and then we'll see it here. Observation, interpretation, and intervention. So anyway, he has all of these, you know, things that you can do in this book to be an adaptive leader. And you might have to challenge a lot of traditional things that, like, and this is in the context of a church, you know, because most of the people that I'm in class with are pastors. So there's 12 of us. We have two guys in there. There's only 3 guys in the whole class. The rest of us are women, 9 women. So 2 of the guys are in the Doctorate of Pastoral Music track, but they still have to take this class, so they're in there. And then the other guy is a Doctor of Ministry person, but he's a pastor. And then there's a principal, so she's not a pastor, but she's a principal of a school. And then there's a youth pastor. Let's see, what are the other ones? And then and then there's one other chaplain. There's 2 chaplains, me and one other female. And then the rest of them are pastors and different churches. There's like one of the pastors is of a Lutheran church, and then most, you know, Methodist, because here we're at Southern Methodist. So, you know, anyway. So, where was I going with that? I don't know, but I'll think of it one of these here in a minute somewhere. But so, okay, so adaptive leader. Okay, so the context of a church, and so that's what we're talking about in here. But this can apply to a business or anything else. But churches are notorious for sticking with the old way that we've always done things. You know, churches are just notorious for that. So that's what this book is is challenging. It's like, well, the culture's changing and all these things are changing, and church growth is dropped and all of these factors, you know, and so we need ways, and we're going to have to be adaptive. Is not just that, but it's also innovative, like find different ways, experimenting with different ways in order to solve these problems. So, okay, so Heifetz. So there's 3 authors to this book. Heifetz is one of them. That's the one that we focused on. And where does it say what he does? I thought we talked about, I don't know if my notes are like mixed up here. Where's page 1? Did I write this down? Yes. Okay. I thought I wrote it down. So we watched a couple videos on him speaking, short ones, but he is a professor at Harvard. Is it School of Business? Something. And he founded something at Harvard. I know I wrote this down. It's just, where did I write it down? Oh, here it is. Okay. Heifetz founded the Center for Public Leadership And so he was like, and he was saying in his video that is a frontier area of thought. And he has had to clarify useful ways to kind of, useful ways to understand. Okay, this is from his video. We over-identify leadership with a set of characteristics. So he taught at Harvard for like 30 years, and then he's founded this Center for Public Leadership at Harvard. And he was talking about the students that came out of, a lot of his students that he's had have gone on to do amazing things. And then, so this book is, very useful. So we over-identify leaders with a set of characteristics, and those characteristics are traditionally like, okay, and this is something I've heard my entire life. I never thought I was a leader because I'm very reserved, quiet. Growing up, I was way more quiet than I am now, but just introverted, and I've kind of come out of my shell a little bit more than I did, years ago. But I never thought I could be a leader because I didn't have the right personality. I didn't have the right the words aren't coming to me. What is the right word for that? Temperament, whatever. I'm not type A. And then people would literally tell me, they would literally say this to me: you need to be more assertive. And it's like, okay, based on what? I mean, my personality is not going to change. It's just not going to change. And I don't appreciate someone telling me that I need to change. If I'm doing something wrong, then okay. But why are you telling me then, and you're telling everyone that leaders are, these charismatic, overbearing, assertive people? No. And so it took me like half my life to realize that I was leading. People were looking to me for leadership. I didn't recognize it as that. And then, that I am a leader. But I lead in my own way. I lead in a different way. I think I said this in one of my other videos, so I apologize if I'm, saying the same thing here. But I loved it that he actually said that in his video today. We over-identify leadership with a set of characteristics, but there isn't one. There is no set of characteristics that classify you as a leader. That's just a myth. It's just really not the case. I mean, Mother Teresa wasn't an assertive, overbearing, whatever. She just did her thing, and we all know what she did, but she was a leader. Okay. So it's a creative process. Someone said that is defined by the work to be done. So it's defined by the challenges that you have in your context, is what they're saying. So in here it's a church, but it could be a business or something else, a nonprofit, anything. And so it's defined by the work that needs to be done and the challenges. And they were saying that, you could be a leader. So another thing that we identify it with is authority. So that person over there who's the president of the hospital, they have the authority. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a leader and make some kind of change. And so we talked about that for quite a while. So it depends on what needs to be done and the challenges that we are facing as a company or a church. We only need to mobilize for solutions. So the leader has to mobilize those people, whoever they're leading, into helping with these solutions. So there's going to be new kinds of challenges that arise. which require new ways, and that is part of what the adaptive leader is looking to do. They're looking for, so you could have a whole template of reasons why, these are the problems we have, and they could all be wrong, so then the solutions that you come up with are wrong, because that's not the real problem. This is the problem. And so I was saying I love that show Undercover Boss, because the CEO of a company goes down to the ground floor level, because and all those problems, this person at the bottom can't contact the CEO, but they're dealing with all these problems that no one's going to know about, because no one's listening to the guy at the bottom, and he can't, maybe his immediate boss is indifferent or whatever, doesn't care, and so they're not listening. And maybe their manual was written 20 years ago, and they're still saying in the manual, do this, this, and this, but these things don't work. And the guy is like, well, I'm just going to do it my way. And the people up here are having meetings about these manuals, and they come up with all these problems in here, and then solutions that it's not going to make any change, right? So the boss goes down and finds out what some of the real problems are in the company, and that's a problem. Some of these people that are way up here are out of touch with the reality of what's going on. Sometimes the people down here are afraid to say what the real problems are. There can be a lot of things like that. So new kinds of challenges require new ways. You have to unlearn the old ways. So sometimes that means departing from tradition. So you can only imagine that in a church, how hard that would be. It's an educative process. Value orientations, something about value orientations. You have to have a stomach for failure. It's accessible to anyone. Have to distinguish the leader from the authority figure. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not. Don't wait until a high position of authority. Don't wait till you get to a high position of authority to feel like you can be a catalyst for change. It's an ongoing adventure. You have to mobilize with faith. There are no set terms. It's an open frontier. And then someone said there's a Japanese Kessen work style. So someone piped up and said that, this is more of an American thought on the way to do leadership, and that you have to be, uber assertive and this and that. And I have seen people take that assertive thing to where now they have no filter. They think they have to be assertive, so now they're just going to say anything and do anything, and they think that's being assertive when it's actually being like a little bit mean. So no, why are we telling people that? And why are we saying that the only way to be assertive is to blurt things out and hurt people's feelings? Like, no, that's not assertive. You can be assertive and do it in the right way. So being on the verge of competencies, I don't know what that was. So the work, so it's about the work to be done. Leadership is different than managerial. So there's a manager and there's a leader. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not. It's an experiment. It can be improving. And something about capacity. What does a leader do? They lead through uncertainty. In a time like this, when things are changing, they're leading through uncertainty. And so they have to create okay, I don't know what that says. And so they said that you have to model the change in oneself. So be open about your own shortcomings and lead by example. So the leader needs to be very self-aware. If they're gonna be aware of the people they're leading and what their needs are and all that, you got to start with you. and know what your limitations are and all of that. And it's going to take someone that has humility, because some people that are in leadership or positions of authority can't admit that they can't do certain things. They can't, and this is a problem with a lot of pastors. Since I grew up in the church, I feel like I can say that. Some pastors feel like they have to do everything, and then 2 years later they're burned out because they didn't delegate anything. So at some point you have to realize your own capabilities, your own limitations, and know that, hey, I need this and this and this person to delegate to, and I need these people on my team because they have the best leadership characteristics that are opposite from mine, or their giftings are here, my gifting is here, and so I need people who have these different giftings. That's a good leader, who knows their limitations, who can delegate, and who can put those other people in the right spot. Where am I at here? You need to know how to mobilize and draw upon those people's gifts. There is a top, from the top down style, and people think you have to be charismatic and all of that. Do we all have to agree? We don't all have to agree. If you're waiting for every, if you're dealing with all these different people and they don't all agree, you're still going to have to make a decision. What is needed from a leadership perspective are new forms of improvisational expertise, a kind of process expertise, maybe some discipleship. The context you're working in makes a huge difference. Does it involve a title or not? But it should involve respect. Somebody brought up the Peter principle, which I wasn't really sure what that was. He explained it, but I don't know. Then there's process expertise, new forms of process expertise. You have to surpass the wisdom of today's experts and realize you don't have all the competencies, and bring in those that do. I already talked about that. Diagnosis of self and looking at yourself as a system, which I never thought about that. You think of yourself as, you don't think of yourself as a system, but that's part of what he says in the book. How much time do I have to adapt? So sometimes there's time constraints. People were saying it depends on your context. Yes, and instead of just no. What does an adaptive leader do? It's a practice. And then these are some quotes. For some, the hardest part might be finding the courage to identify and claim what is important to you, those goals and challenges for which it is worth taking on the pains and risks of leadership. For other people, figuring out the purpose is not as daunting as grasping the practices required for making progress, stepping out into the unknown skillfully. We try to address both parts in this field, purpose and skill. The practice of leadership, like the practice of medicine, involves two core processes: diagnosis first and then action. And then there's this little table here, if I can read it: diagnosis of the system, diagnosis of self, action systems, and action self. A good leader casts a vision to thrive. So you have to figure out, is your organization thriving? Are they not? Why are they not? And what it would look like in the future. This is what you want it to look like. If we were thriving, it would look like this. So that's what you're shooting for. The adaptive leader is a practice. Adaptive leadership is a practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. That's one of the quotes. Adaptive changes build on the past rather than jettison it. So you don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you don't live in the past, but you build on the past. Organizational adaptation occurs through experimentation. Organisms, someone was talking about organisms, that's not part of the book. Technical problems versus adaptive challenges. People have long confuse the notion of leadership with authority, power, and influence. We find it extremely useful to see leadership as a practice and activity that some people, I'm not going to look that up, sorry guys. And then we talk about disorientation, disequilibrium, and then there's something called the leadership laboratory. Leadership is a difficult practice personally because it almost always requires you to make challenging adaptation yourself. What makes adaptation complicated is that it involves deciding what is so essential that it must be presented going forward. We talked about Dark Night of the Soul. Okay. To become what you are not, you must go by a way which you know not. Some famous person said that. It's St. John of the Cross, obviously, because that's under Dark Night of the Soul. He said, to know what you are not, you must go by a way which you know not. Pretty profound. Okay, next. Identify a major challenge facing your community. So then we broke up into groups and we talked about all of this. And then there's the observation, intervention, interpretation, and intervention. So the observation is also like the diagnosis. So you diagnose the problem, then you interpret the problem, then you intervene, which is like the solution. What areas of influence do I have access to? That's a question you ask yourself. What are the technical problems for adaptive change? Then there's this qualitative data and quantitative metrics. How do we determine if we are succeeding or not? What if we are thriving or if we're not thriving? And then the data needs to reflect the reality of what is actually going on. So, then we went to the next book, which is Quietly Courageous, Leading the Church in a Changing World. So, what I was going to say about the Harvard professor, he was also a medical doctor. And then he also went to Juilliard and was learning to play the cello, which is actually my personal favorite. So our professor was so there's that. It wasn't enough that he, taught at Harvard for 30 years. He was also all of these other things, like a medical doctor and blah, blah. And so in his book, he kind of always relates it back to medicine somehow. So Rendell, he was an ordained Methodist minister, written several books, and he is a proponent of adaptive leadership, which is why we read that book first, because this guy likes adaptive leadership, and so it's kind of like a good book to read second. Someone said his overall thesis is correct. It will take courage. Quiet, courageous leadership. What is it? Page 86 quote. I'm going to have to look that up because I don't have many notes on all of this. Page 86 quote. To challenge such assumptions of scarcity, agency must be reversed so that churches and denominations begin to ask where God's hand is already at work, the agency being with God. And how can the church get behind that work and help the church denomination as resource, not as agent? Okay, that's page 86. And then there's a quote from page 8. The quiet courage of leadership. Oh boy. It's going to take me a little bit to find these quotes here because I didn't want to write it all out. It's too much. The quiet courage of leadership. Oh boy. Okay, quiet leadership, the kind of leadership that will address deep change that moves beyond constituent self-interest, requires leaders to behave in quite different ways that will be contrary to the established norms of the institution. I don't think that's the quote, but that's what we're reading right now, because I don't know. All right, page 32. This is truly an adaptive situation. All right, page 32. So there's this shift from convergent to a divergent culture. There's a distinction between convergence and divergence. We'll just leave it at that. And then there's a quote from page 115. We currently live in a culture that does not move ahead by agreement. Instead, leaders will need to learn to help others move ahead on the clarity of their story and purpose amid their differences. Familiar democratic practices will need to cede space to less familiar community practices in order for our congregations and denominations to live in the new cultural landscape. So when there's a crisis, it's an opportunity at the same time. Community building is essential for the organization to thrive. Vocation equals leadership equals community building. We need to move forward as a community. Where do we go from here is a question we have to ask ourselves. And there's something about skill acquisition, which I wrote nothing else about. I don't know. Skill acquisition. The Heifetz model. So it has all these models in here. Novice to advanced beginner to competent to proficient. And then expert intuition, we may need another kind of expert. Page 141. Experience. Expert intuition is not a feeling, it is a form of rapid thinking. It depends on recognizing something that has been encountered before and relies on experience. The response to expert intuition is also very quick because one is operating in a known situation, or at least in a situation sufficiently similar to times and places previously encountered that can inform the response. Time and experience make the difference. We are on the last page. So somehow this is metaphorically resonant. How? You tell me. All right. Okay, models of change. There's the linear model and the non-linear model, which is liquid. Type 1, problem planning, problem solving with a goal. Short term. Type 2, developmental, long range planning, assumption, things are good, build on what is being done. Long term. And then the non-linear model, type 3, frame bending and planning, asks essential questions. What are we? What are we called to do? Who is our neighbor? Goal, to examine purpose and call from God. Takes 12 to 18 months to complete, revisited or revised every 3 to 5 years. So, about this book. We didn't have as much time because we spent all our time on the other one, but courageous leadership. So, should leaders pursue the problem solving of linear change? That was a question on page 74. Problems lend themselves to control. Liquid time in which we are faced with conditions built on divergence do not respond to control, but they do provide new ways to be and to act in the world if we willingly stand in the chaos open to change. Okay. To walk willingly into chaos is to accept mystery. Christianity has long understood, What's that one? That's another quote. Yeah, I looked for that one early and didn't find it. So it is courageous leadership is creative, good leadership is not enough. And then, so he was like, these are like bullet points, the assumptions, the temptations, where do we start? Something about this is not a sustained emergent church movement. So someone brought up the question, how does, once you do all of this and you adapt, you know, your problems and your solutions and all of that, then how do you sustain that, and how do you sustain that type of leadership? And then how to build a community when it is always changing. So that was part of that whole question of how do we sustain it? It's constantly changing, and I think that's part of the thing, you know. I mean, in life, everything is always going to change. So, you know, you can't just write it all out and this is the way it's always going to be. I think it's a mindset of the fact that things are going to change. The world and culture is always going to be changing. It's kind of a fluid thing, and so you need to be on your game all the time. You need to be thinking that way all the time. And so when you do the adaptive leadership model and all of that, and you implement whatever you implement, you need to know that just in a few short years, you're gonna have to do this again. So the old way of thinking, especially in churches, is like, okay, we've got this system, this model, blah, 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 and boom, we're done. We've got it all written out, got this old manual from 1961, and we're good to go. But that's not the case. So, okay, so we're done with the notes. So I'll tell you a little bit about our group presentation, because that is what I have to work on now. I'm still writing a paper that is due Saturday. It's a book report, so it's not like a huge paper, but it's still 5 pages and all of that. I think I have 1.5 pages written, and I would like to have it done so that I can rest for maybe 24 hours before I come back next week for the next class. But our group project, so we've been breaking early every day. I didn't know this was going to be the way it was this week, but we go to lunchtime and talk the whole entire time, do lecture and talking and sharing and all of that for 4 hours, and then it's 3.5 hours. After lunch, we meet with our groups and to work on this group project, which is, I think, 35% of our grade or something. So it's 3 people in each group. I'm with one of the pastors, one of the Methodist pastors. No, she's Baptist. She's Baptist pastor. And then one of the Doctor of Pastoral Music students, and me. And so we, you know, you have to brainstorm. We only have 4 days to get this all together for this group project, and there's a rubric and all this, and so we have to come up with an original idea of based on this book, the whole adaptive leadership thing. So like identify an idea, so you have to do that whole observation, diagnosis, and then interpretation, and then intervention of this original idea that you have. So we came up with the fact that, and I'll share more on this after the presentation is over, because I won't have anything else to share that day on Friday. But we came up with the fact that so many people have been hurt by the church, et cetera, and for all these different reasons, you know, you name it. And so we came up with a service. So we're calling it a Vespers Refuge service for So we're calling ourselves trauma informed. We're going to be a trauma sensitive church where the leaders are trauma informed. Okay, this is our original idea. I mean, there's some stuff on the internet about that, about churches that are already doing this, but it's not real. It's not like widely known about. So we decided to come up with all these steps of how to heal people that have been hurt by the church in order to draw them back in, all these ways. And the one thing that we're implementing for the group presentation is a service. So it's going to be a Vesper service, which is a little bit shorter of a service rather than a hour-long service. It's like a 30-minute service, and we're going to do the whole service in class, and this is all on PowerPoint, of course, and stuff. But so we're going to give all this information and statistics on how people are falling away from the church and the reasons why, and how they got hurt and traumatized and all of that. And then my part is the interpretation part, and so I am writing some real stories, hypothetical stories, or I'm making up a story of people that have been hurt for these certain reasons. First, originally we had 4, and now I've come up with 6. So I'm going to name these people, fictitious people, and their stories. But it could be stories that I already know about or I already heard about, but nobody's going to know that. But so my part in the presentation is reading about how these people became hurt by the church, which gives us a reason to need to do this healing refuge service. Okay, so day 3 of the DMin program done. Tomorrow's day 4, and I will have a video for tomorrow. We'll go over my notes then. I hope this is interesting to someone. Anyway, you guys take care, and I'll see you in the next video.